Renee Prajek. I have been the budget director here for 8 years now, I think. So some of these slides do repeat from last year, but they're updated for this year. So if you've been to one of these before, just hang with me. But questions whenever, it's fine. You don't have to wait till the end. So budget loading, it is budget basics. Every local government in New York State is required to adopt a budget for all its operating funds. For us, that is the general, highway, fire, ambulance, lighting, garbage, and water. The budget is comprised of two major parts, basically the money in and the money out. The fancy names for those are the budgeted revenues and the appropriations. So what is a budget? It is the plan for how to spend the taxpayers' money and also the funding sources for how to provide the services to the taxpayers. So you want to look at both the upcoming year, known events, things you want to plan out of reserves, unforeseen events such as contingencies, as well as your use of fund balance and how much you want to keep in fund balance at year end. A budget is a living document. That means while it is adopted once in the fall for us, it does not have to stay static. You can do budget amendments, you can do budget transfers throughout the year because no one has a crystal ball, no one knows exactly what is going to happen in the next year. We have a number of accounts that we, throughout the year, find out will go over budget. You can do a transfer from another fund, or you can take it out of fund balance if it's a particularly large purchase you can't pull from something else. A budget is a plan. While it is shown in terms of money, there is no actual money spent when a budget is formed. You are just setting it aside for authorized purposes. All money remains in the actual bank accounts of the town. It is not actually spent at the time the budget's formed. Appropriations is the authorization to spend that amount. So if revenues fall short of the expectations, the appropriation should also be looked at and adjusted. So if you're planning on getting a grant and the grant falls through, you shouldn't be spending on the money. If you plan to have $100,000 of mortgage tax but only get $80,000, then you should probably look at cutting back $20,000 somewhere else because of the shortfall. An encumbrance is also the step between appropriation and expenditure. So when you appropriate is the budget, when you encumber is the plan to spend, and then the expenditure is the actual purchase of it. So the budget is set annually at the end of the fiscal year. Any unused appropriations or authority to spend lapses, it does not carry over. That is what sometimes people say, well, if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. Not exactly, but the authorization to spend that money does lapse. It is then created a new authorization with a new budget. When a department doesn't spend the money, it does go back to fund balance, and that fund balance then becomes reallocated in the next year's budget. So multi-year planning, you want to look at setting long-term priorities and work towards goals rather than making choices just on this year. It may be nice to have a 0% tax this year, but then where does that put you 4 years down the line? It may be nice to spend all your fund balance, but then how are you going to get big projects down the line? Or when you go out for debt financing, are you going to have a good bond rating? So these are things that you have to think about long-term. And then here is an example for like a grocery shopping. You would identify the fiscal year as the shopping trip. You establish a budget, how much money you want to spend. If you have a shortfall, if you don't get money in, then you would have to adjust what you plan to spend. If your son wants a toy and that's an unplanned expense, then you would have to review your budget, maybe make an amendment to your budget. Do you want to get the toy that badly? Do you want to take something out of something else or not? Maybe your groceries come up a little less, so you have extra money to spend elsewhere. The encumbrance would be if you pick up the toy and put it in your grocery cart. Now, until the point where you walk up to the end or up to the cashier, you are obligated to pay for that, but you actually haven't paid for it yet. So that at that point you'd be encumbered. When you actually check out at the register, that's when it turns to an expense or an expenditure. So you can also look at this example for unexpected revenue. Say you find money on the ground, that would be unexpected revenue, and then when your whole shopping trip is over or whole year is over, you look at what's left in your hand and that would be what's left in your fund balance. So for this year, our budget timeline is here. We started it in August, and we have to have it approved by November. We are currently at this point in here. Our public hearing is next week. We are looking to adopt at either the October 15th or November 5th meeting. We tend to try and leave extra room for the opportunity for people to speak up, but the last few years we haven't had a lot of questions or commentary. So we have discussed possibly adopting at the August 15th meeting, or October 15th meeting. So history of the 2% tax cap, which everyone may hear as the term of the year. So back in 2012, the inflation rate for 12 months was 1.4%. The Federal Reserve wanted to modulate inflation, so they adopted a target of 2% inflation each year. So the goal was for prices to raise by 2% each year. So they set the 2% tax cap was signed into law. It establishes the limit of annual growth of property taxes levied by local governments and school districts. All independent school districts and local governments, including counties, towns, and villages, are subject to this. There are limited exclusions. The local government doesn't really have any. Schools can exclude capital projects, but the towns cannot. What happens if we need to go over the tax cap? There is an override mechanism which the town of Boston has never exercised. However, that will potentially be changing this year as we are looking to override it for the first time. So if you look at this slide, you can see back in 2012 when it was first adopted, in kind of yellow we have between 2 and 3% inflation, the green is under 2%. So for about 10 years, the 2% tax cap seemed manageable. Inflation was around 2%. But then, around 2022, it started climbing, and we had 7% and 6% inflation in 2023 and 2024, which, if you have your consumer goods going up by 7%, and you're only able to increase taxes by 2%, service lines have to be cut in the budget or adjusted, or you have to find other revenue sources. So it's becoming harder and harder to stay under the tax cap. The last few years, we have managed to, by making different adjustments, such as decreasing some tax rates to increase others and pulling out of fund balance. Here is just a visual representation of the same numbers I gave, which you can see over there are the peak in the last couple years. So overriding the tax cap this year, we are proposing to do that for the biggest reason being our water projects. We've been talking about water for at least 6 years now. This year we have a $3.7 million bond anticipation note, or BAN, which went out for sale in 2025 for the first, or 2024 for the first time. We renewed it this year, which means we had our first principal payment due coming next year. So next year we are going to have about $260,000 in debt service due. So that means $96,000 just in District 1 for water phase 1, or phase 1 of water alone. Previously, we did up water district by small incremental increases the last few years, 15%, 20%, knowing that we had the interest payments coming due. But this year, when we took a look at the line, we have to add an additional $96,000 of revenue to pay for the debt. That is going to double the tax rate in Water District 1. Which, if you look at this legal section of the bond anticipation note, it reads as that under the state constitution, the town is required to pledge its faith and credit for the payment of the principal and interest of the notes. The state is specifically precluded from restricting the power of the town to levy taxes or real estate therefore. The state requires the town to provide the appropriation for payment of interest and obligations, which means the town is required to make the payments of principal and interest. Down here, it mentions that the tax levy limitation. It also provides the method to surmount the limitation, go to the tax levy limitation law, which is saying if you can't afford to levy, can't afford to pay the principal and interest on the current levy, you need to raise the levy. And if that involves going over the tax cap, you need to go over the tax cap. That is what the legalese says. So it's literally saying to take the tax levy limitation and surmount it if you need to. So what happens what is the process for that? You have to hold a public hearing over on the tax cap. We set that for next week, October 15th. Then you have to pass a resolution adopting a local law, and that local law is pretty short. It just says that it's being allowed. Once passed, the budget can be adopted. This is a local law that only is applicable for 1 year. It does not roll. It does not mean we can go over next year or the year after without adopting other further local laws. So from the New York State Association of Towns, over the last 5 years, an average of 21% of towns in New York State exceed the tax cap each year. So it's not like Boston is going to be the first one doing it. There's 20% of towns doing it. So our public hearing here is a public hearing notice. It's going to be held next week. And then there is the resolution that's up for proposal. It specifically specifies in there that we're doing it mainly because of the water projects. Here is the local law that we have. It for adjustment, it just says, due to general municipal law, we are needing it to allow the tax levy limit to be exceeded to adopt a budget that goes over the tax cap. So for the next part, I like to do a recap of last year's budget before we get into this year's. So last year, on your tax bill that you get in the fall or the spring, you have county, town, and school taxes, or county, town taxes, and then school taxes come in the fall. So Erie County puts out a comparison each year of houses with $150,000 of assessed value, or fair market value, I mean. And they compare them to show the different taxes you have on your house. So based on that comparison, in 2025, we'd have on a house of $150,000 assessed value, your county taxes would be $516, your town would be $132, and your school would be $1,495. Or basically, the town is 6.2% of all the taxes you pay. So a lot of the time when people complain about their taxes going up, a lot of it's the school, a portion of it's the county, and then a smaller portion is the town. So comparing town tax rate in red right there to our neighboring municipalities with similar populations. A lot of people like to compare us to Eden because we do have very similar populations as well as similar demographics. Concord is the other one that's closest here. You can see that we have much lower taxes in the town and general fund than them. Collins, of the 5 comparisons here, Collins decreased, Boston stayed the same, Eden, Concord, Newstead all increased from 24 to 25. If we were to take the equalization rate of each of these towns and put it at 100, because we all have different equalization rates, then our town tax would go from here to there, as compared to those ones would bump up to there. As you can see, different towns have, like Newstead has a really high equalization rate, so their change is very different, or not very different. So in 2025, we did drop 1 spot. We are now ranked 6th lowest town tax, 7th lowest town tax, not 6th lowest, but we are still in the lower of the town taxes of 1.69. That is on the general and town, or general fund and highway fund taxes. So that does not count the special districts because those are not across the whole town. So this is one of the first pages in the budget. It's just all of our different funds. So the general and highway is what created that tax rates that we were just looking at. The appropriations, as I explained, are the money you plan to spend. The estimated revenues are the money you plan to get in, usually sales tax or interest. Fund balance is the amount you plan to spend from fund balance, and then taxation is the amount of property taxes you are going to get. So from the past budgets, 2024 and 2025, you can see that our biggest 3 categories are garbage, fire, and highway, with water as a mirroring competitor. So another thing to consider is fund balance. We have different classifications of fund balance under GASB 54. We have non-spendable, which is prepaid and inventory items. We have restricted, which is grant money or bond holders and things that are set by regulations. We have committed money that is such as an equipment reserve or our drainage reserve. We have assigned money, which is like the highway fund, the general, or the highway fund, the lighting fund, garbage fund that can only be used for those specific purposes. And then anything else in the general fund is unassigned. For here, we have reserve funds. So we do have a reserve for debt set up in our water fund. We have a reserve for ambulance hanging on that is committed to the contract we signed for ambulance last year. The reserve is supposed to be closed out, but we're waiting to make the final payments on that ambulance. We have reserve for equipment in highway fund, and then in the general fund, we have a reserve for senior facility, tax stabilization, building and parks, recreation, and drainage. And then this is just another way to calculate how much fund balance we have. You take all the different types of classifications I mentioned on the previous slide and add them together. We do also have a calculation of the amount of minimum fund balance we should be keeping. I have in red over there two categories, fire and garbage, which are actually either right at or right below the minimum fund balance we should have, which is set per our fund balance policy. It should be a calculation of a percentage of the amount we plan to spend next year. So our tax revenue doesn't come in until March, so we need to be able to get through January and February on the taxes of the prior year. So that's why usually most of them are 15 to 20%, because we calculate we'll spend about 20% of our taxes in those 2 months before the tax revenue comes in. So that's how much you need to keep on hand to cover. So going into the 2026 tentative budget, again, the same summary page is updated for new numbers, same categories, and then displayed in dollars, we have our property tax is our biggest category, it's at 50%, and then sales tax is 21%. That is the primary funding source for the general fund. Property tax funds a lot of the other funds. And then our other smaller categories are departmental income, state aid, fund balance, and other tax items. So how we spend our money is by percentage. Our biggest percentage is salaries, but that's only 23%, so it's not even a quarter of our budget. But if you add it with employee benefits, it is a quarter of our budget. Then we have general fund departmental costs is 13%, equipment is 7%, highway is 7%, EMS services 2%, fire is 16%, and garbage is 14%. Our debt payments is 8%, and lighting and water that is not debt related is 2%. Our total budgeted appropriations, or to be expenditures, eventually is $7.39 million for next year. So the $7.39 million is here. We are planning to get $2.86 million from revenues other than taxes. So you can see this section, not the taxes, would be $2.8 million. And then we have the $3.7 million, which was the 50% in the category before. So the breakdown of the overall tax levy increase are, in order to calculate it, we have to take the prior year tax levy limit, $3.4 million. We have our proposed tax levy for this year is $258,113 increase. So that comes from $33,000 of assessed value changes. So the tax roll actually went up by $7.2 million between the 2023 and 2024 roll years. So that added a lot of people to our tax roll. It added a lot to our assessed value. We also had an equalization rate drop from 52 to 50%. Our garbage fund is going to have a $16 per parcel increase. That's because our contract is tied to CPI, and the CPI for garbage specifically went up 6.1% this year. That's $50,000. Garbage on additional totes, we also put that 6% increase on that. That's going to be or we did a 5% increase. It'll be a $464 total over the amount of people who just have the additional totes, not the people who don't. Then we have for the fire fund a 10% increase. That's $85,000. That's because we have the 5% contractual increase as well as LoSAP. Lighting fund is a 30% increase, which only actually warrants $4,000 extra. skyrocketed energy rates is what is the cause of that. And then Water District 1, I touched on our ban already. Changes to unpaid items will actually decrease by a little under $8,000, and our total increase, that's how we calculate $258,113. So in order to calculate what we can get for our tax levy, you take the prior year, you go with a tax-based growth factor, which last year we had 1.009, this year we had 1.001. So we had a very big decrease in what our growth factor was allowed for the town. How that's calculated, I'm not sure, because I thought our town was growing with all the houses going in. So I don't know about that. But our levy growth factor is a 2% tax cap. We are allowed 69 there. And then with our carryover of 2,000 from last year, we couldn't have 3.7 million. So we're going over by, again, 181,000. So here I've highlighted on the rate sheet that's in our budget exactly where the rate changes are happening, the 10% in fire, the 30% in light, $16 in garbage and refuse, and the 100% in the capital line of Water 1. The maintenance line is not going to change. The rest of them are staying the same. So on a per house breakdown, this is again on a house of an assessed value of $150,000. So if you take and apply each of these rates here, multiplied by your $150,000, this is what you would get. So general fund $35, highway $228 for fire, $10 for light, $25 for ambulance, $320 for garbage, and $838 total. And then obviously the water districts are different depending on if you're in a district and what district you're in. So our equalization rates, here is a little history. It was last fully at 100% in 2012. We've been falling since. We've now fallen halfway in 13 years. So equalization rate is the state's measure of municipality's level assessment. Basically, if you go out to the fair market and want to buy a house and say, I have $150,000 to spend. If you buy a house in Cheektowaga for $150,000, if you buy a house in Boston for $150,000, you're going to have different taxes. And part of that is because the equalization rate. So let's say Cheektowaga is assessed, equalization rate is 30%, and Boston is 50%. Your Boston's rate, you're going to be paying on $75,000 because 50% of 150 is $75,000. Whereas in Cheektowaga, if the equalization rate is 30%, you multiply 30% by 150, you'd be paying on $50,000. So here's the calculation of that, some numbers. You can see down here is a good example because we're at 50,000. If our full market value is 200,000, our assessed value is 100,000. So you're taxed on your assessed value, but you may sell your house at fair market value. But that is why your assessed value may not change on your tax roll year to year, because it only really changes if there's big assessment updates. Either that's by you go to the building code office and you get something added onto it, or the town does a reassessment. Whereas the equalization rate may make your fair market value change every year on your tax roll. So if you look at your tax roll, obviously you have your demographics up there. Here is the assessed value, which is used to calculate taxes. There is the uniform percent of value, which is the equalization rate, and your full market value. People will come into the assessor's office year after year and say, why did my full market value go up? Because the equalization rate dropped. It didn't, nothing that her office did to change that. And then if you want to read your tax bill, you can see that the assessed value will drop down to your taxable value. It's not always the same because you may have an exemption. Here, it's a town-owned property, so all of our town taxes is exempt. So our taxable value is 0 for the certain taxes that are exempt. So you can see also on this line, we have different taxes here. We have some general highway and water taxes that are levied by the town, but then it's also in the middle of the library, county, and sewer taxes, which are not levied by the town, but they all come in total to the value that is shown on the bottom of your tax bill. And this is just an example breaking out how it can look. Here's the town taxes, whereas that's the whole county and town taxes. So on this example, your town taxes were $842, your county was $1,378 for a total of $2,220. So again, going back to that first slide we saw of town taxes are much smaller chunk than the county was. So the county also publishes out what each of the comparable rates for the towns are. Here is showing the town of Boston, what the county library rates are, as well as the general highway and total town. And then this is the report that I was pulling all of the comparable municipality numbers off for my earlier charts. So this is where it shows school, county, and town. So I mentioned already exemptions. You go to the town assessor's office if you want to apply for an exemption. It pulls on the bottom of your tax bill and it decreases the amount you will pay. Mostly those are senior, veteran, agriculture. Those are the biggest ones in the town, I believe. In 2024 to 2025, the exemptions were fairly similar. They actually decreased by $245,000, which on the overall $7 million budget is not a big portion when we are looking at $61 million of assessed value. Here is the exemption report summary that has to be published with each of the year's tentative budgets. So if you want to look at the tentative taxes for each year, I broke it out by fund, and you can see general stayed the same for the last few years, as well as highway and ambulance, slight increase in fire, light, and garbage. This is where, if you break out all the water, this is the rate doubling, right here, this little tiny amount. That's the rate doubling that is pushing us over the tax bill. Because if you come down here, we're going from 44 to 88 on the capital line of the Water District 1. Because that overall, when you spread across the whole district, is going to be $80,000. But to the individual household, it's a $40 increase if you have an assessed value of $150,000. So that's how, when you look at, people say, well, my taxes are going up, blah, blah, blah. Well, you have to look at each individual line, because that sounds scary. It sounds crazy that you're doubling, but the impact is a lot smaller. If I said Water District 3 tax was doubling, it would be a lot bigger effect than this Water District 1.
Are the new houses in Water District 1, Deanna Drive,
I believe so, yes.
are they in those calculations?
The parcel count for Water District 1 did go up by 13 or 30 houses. I'm not sure. It did go up. I don't know if all of them are attached yet.
You're referring, just for clarity, you're referring to the ones on Deanna Drive, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, Deanna Drive would have been factored into that.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Any houses that were established by the May 31st is when the assessment rule is cut off. So if they were put in and hooked up after that, they would not be reflected till next year.
So there won't be many. There's just as of recently, there's been a lot of certificate of occupancies,
Right,
okay, through this late summer, early fall.
right, that's
So there won't be many that will be on.
that, right. So there's a possibility of that water tax going down a little bit when all of those homes get on the,
I don't foresee it going down, because behind phase 1, we do have another water project coming, but it will be spread out among more parcels, yeah. So here's just a history of the last 15 years of tax rates. You can see general kind of sloped down a little bit, but it's pretty steady. Highway went up and then is steady. Light's been a little fluctuating. Ambulance has been steady after we raised it a while back, and then fire's gone up and garbage is going up. So here is again the chart I showed earlier, and then showing that 4% of our town taxes goes to the general fund. That covers all the salaries of the employees of the town. It is the cost to run all the offices, from the town clerk, assessor, court, to all of the costs of dog control, historian, summer concerts, attorney, engineer, the senior programs, the youth programs, the town buildings, the parks, as well as large repairs and upgrades One of the big ones we're doing right now is transitioning the website to a .gov. That may sound like a small change, but it does roll out to big effects from the website having to change, all of our publishings having to change, documents, business cards. It's a bigger change than it sounds like. And then we're also looking to do tablets for board members, hoping to move more towards digitalization. We're getting a records management grant, hopefully goes through. We're at the final stages of getting approval for that. So hoping to scan some maps in to make those digital. New parks tractor, historical marker upgrades, and then yes, we're looking at potentially some upgrades to the lion shelter, a stage, some built-in heaters perhaps, or an AV system. It would work for summer concert series as well as any events held under there like Leaf or renting it out.
What's the overall budget for that? What did you put in for 2026 for all those things?
For,
All your large planned repairs, upgrades, and projects?
they do fit into different lines. So the parks tractor is 22,000, the historical marker is about $4,000. The records management is about 80,000, a little less than that. The stage heaters and AV system was about 20,000. IT stuff, we have 15,000 in the budget for that.
So it all just falls on different lines?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
So for the personnel services, here is 2025 as well as proposed 2026 costs. We are proposing one new position of a deputy town clerk, focusing on the modernizing of records. That will help with this grant that we're talking about, as well as hopefully getting our code software updated. It may also include combining with another position, more to be determined by the board on that. Then we also have miscellaneous small adjustments, such as adding PTO to the assessor, promotional pay to a couple employees, allowance for extra hours to the cleaner, that's 21,000. And then it breaks down to our increase to elected officials will be 13,760, and the remaining 29 appointed employees will have $37,020 split across them. So those are the overall $95,793 of proposed increases in the personnel services line. The biggest thing here is we're trying to focus on retaining the employees we have. We have a really good staff at Town Hall, and a lot of them have been here multiple years. So we are trying to be cognizant of how to keep them while also staying conservative in our budget, but being able to retain the people we have and make sure that they have a living wage. So here's the salaries of elected officials that we have to publish out. They have a 5% increase on them for the proposed 2026 year. Here is where we have our comparison to peer towns for the highway super, town clerk, supervisor, town justice, and council members. We are in red for the town of Boston. We're kind of in the middle of each category. So revenue sources for 2026, for the general fund, you can see that 49%, last year was 50%, of the general fund is financed from sales tax. Everyone likes to say, well, my property taxes pay for your salary. Actually, there's no salaries that can be supported on the property tax alone. The property tax here is only $143,000. If you paid attention to the slide about salaries, $143,000 doesn't cover many people. It might cover one department, or it might cover a couple of the elected officials, but you're not covering salaries with property taxes. You're covering salaries with sales tax, with departmental income, or mortgage tax, court fines, franchise fees, and then we also have the rent of the trooper barracks. So here, I know this is too hard to read. This is mainly for posting it online. This breaks down each of the different lines of the budget. Some things I want to highlight is most of the year, the equipment and contractual lines stay the same. We do take a look at every line of the budget every year. We assess down to what kind of office supplies are they buying, what kind of truck equipment, how many service costs and everything. Most of the costs don't change year to year, but we do still take a look at them. We spend a lot of time on that. Some things to highlight, we are changing, decreasing the accounting fees. Since we've added another staff member, we've changed our processes. We're not using Drescher Malecki as often. They are solely down to being our audit firm now. We are decreasing the fiscal agent, our band issuance costs, because we thought our phase 2 would move along quicker, and we thought we'd have more band issuance than we're actually seeing. Here we are putting in hopefully a one-time records management grant, both the revenue side and the expenditure side. And then we are $15,000 in equipment for the IT, which is the tablets and the website upgrades I mentioned, as well as we have increases in insurance. Our insurance on the town is going up an estimated $11,000, as well as we are decreasing the contingent account again a little bit because we don't usually use that. Safety inspection or code enforcement, we are increasing both of those lines because we've added more staff, and more staff means more costs. They have mileage, they have office supplies, they have trainings that they need to attend, they have to be certified. So we're increasing both, we're increasing their contractual line. We are adding a new public safety code for the boarding up of buildings, especially, I know people love hearing about words. That has caused a few times to be boarded up this year. Right now it's hitting the code enforcement line, so we're gonna give it its own line, public safety. Street lighting is going up. As I mentioned with the lighting districts, same thing's gonna apply in the general fund for the accounts that we pay out of the general fund. The lighting costs are going up. For parks, the equipment I'm highlighting, while it's pretty similar to last year, we did get a tractor last year for $18,000. This year we're getting a tractor for roughly $22,000. And then drainage and erosion, we are taking those funds both down to zero because we've had a drainage fund established for at least 4 years now, and that balance is about $140,000. So if we have a drainage project come up, at that point we will do a budget amendment and we will pull funds from the reserve into the year spend. And then employee benefits are going up, $9,000 in retirement, $7,000 in Social Security, $1,000 in workers' comp, and $3,000 in medical insurance. We do have a 15% increase on our medical insurance this year. So the actual cost of the increase is as much as, I first calculated about $11,000 increase, but our HRA utilization is only about 75%. So we save some of the money for the town by that. So our only out-of-pocket costs are going up about $3,000. And then we're increasing our transfers to the capital projects fund by $10,000. For the highway fund, that's 24% of the town tax. It covers the salaries of highway workers, as well as the salt for sand for plowing, the stone and asphalt for summer, the road repairs, and as well as truck purchases. Which this year the town highway superintendent wants a new plow truck with a dump body and plows, which is estimated at $358,000. We last bought one in 2021 for $251,000, so it's a significant inflation increase there. We are looking to use about $100,000 out of the reserve fund, and then the rest will be in the equipment line. Here's a breakdown of the personnel services last year and then this year, or 2025 and 2026. The overall increase is only about $11,000. It's only about 2 to 3%, even though their contract raises are 4%, because we just had 2 long-term highway MEO5s retired and were replaced with MEO1s. So lower experience, lower rate, lower cost, even though they do have the contractual increase on their union contract. So our employees, they do have 4% for this year, which also meant their retirement and Social Security increased a little bit. Their workers' comp is the same because we do have a 2-year rate lock on it. Health insurance for them increased by $7,000. Just different usage, different plans than the general fund employees. CHIPS is about the same. So CHIPS, PAVE New York, Extreme Winter Recovery, and POP are 4 different state-run highway programs, all for paving paving. They have different classifications. Some you can buy equipment on, some you can only pave potholes with, some you can do blacktop, some you can do binder. That's the reason they're still separated. It's a little bit of annoyance, but there's 4 different buckets. They're pretty much the same as last year. General repairs, all those lines are staying the same, as well as we are keeping snow removal the same. Salt is going up a significant amount this year. However, we have budgeted $130,000 for the last at least 5 years, and we've never even covered $100,000. We haven't decreased that budget because the year we do, we'll get a historic snowstorm and we won't have enough money to buy salt. So we've left allowance room in there because no one has a crystal ball. Again, with the machinery, I just mentioned about the truck. So here is a list of our highway equipment. There's a stretch from 2011 to 2020 where nothing was really purchased. You can see here we have equipment ranging back to the 1970s, still operational in the town. Some of those older trucks, they just keep going. Good maintenance, and they last longer. And then you can see there's a span where it stops. We stopped purchasing from 2011 to 2018. We have started onto a rotation of trying to do at least one vehicle a year. We have had a backlog of ordering times though, so sometimes those don't come in for a year timeline. The most recent addition added was we did buy a 2024 International CB515, which is basically a smaller snowplow, the pickup truck size snowplow. Highway, here's the differences between chip seal and Nova Chip. We've started doing Nova Chip in the most recent couple of years because people complain about oil and stone. They say it's messy. The good things is that it does tend to heal itself and last longer. You can get like a 4-year life cycle, and then you don't really have to mill and pave because it kind of grinds itself in or goes into the gutter. Nova Chip asphalt, that stays. It will crack eventually, and it will have to be milled and paved when you do that. But it will last longer. It can last up to 20 years. So there's pluses and minuses to both. Nova Chip is way more expensive than chip seal. So we've been doing, I believe, 1 road a year with the Nova Chip. Bob has been, our highway superintendent's been pulling that from CHIPS funding, the state funding. So their highway revenue sources are primarily property tax and then sales tax, and then that state funding is where he gets the money for either an equipment vehicle or some of the paving costs. For the fire fund, we have a 5% increase in their contractual costs. There are 3 fire companies in the town, Patchen, North Boston, and Boston. And then there's also dispatch that we pay for them. That's got a 2% increase. We pay for their physicals and respirator tests. We pay for their service award program, as well as the admin costs for that, as well as their workers' comp program. So I mentioned briefly earlier, the LoSAP program, we are going to propose going up to a $400,000 contribution for that, half funded by sales tax, half by the tax increase. So what is LoSAP? LoSAP is the Length of Service Award Program. We have 3 companies that play into this. We have Nationwide, who is the investment platform used to invest and grow the money. That is where the LoSAP money sits and is invested. Landmark Wealth is the ones who sit behind the computer and move the money around. They don't actually have the money, they just move it around. They come in and meet with us, usually quarterly. This year's been a little bit less than that, but they track the progress of the funds. And then Firefly is the new admin company we switched to as of November of last year. Previously it was PenFlex, but basically PenFlex or Firefly, they're the math people. They calculate the amount needed for the annual report. They get paid a fee solely to do the reports and assist with beneficiary forms and the admin side. So the Fire LoSAP report looks a little differently with a different company, but a lot of the information is the same. The calculations, even by a separate company, came up the same. The math is the math, the money that's there is the money that's there. We have participant counts. Here you can see that the overall number of participants from 2023 to 2024, because it's on a lag, went from 188 to 189. Number of members earning credit went up from 71 to 74. 4 people reached entitlement age and became eligible to collect their service. 4 people who are collecting service for over 10 plus years died and they stopped receiving payments. 1 resignation of a non-vested member and 3 forfeitures of people. So those are the changes to the participants in the account. That rolls up into the amount of the actual amount due each year, because that plays into how many people are going to be collecting the benefits. So here's information from the prior PenFlex report. It goes back history to 2017. You can see over on the far column, our funded ratio has been falling each year because we are not making the contribution that is suggested. Every year for the last few years, we've had a contribution that's suggested at around $400,000. Back, I don't know, 10 years or so, they cut the contribution to LoSAP end because unless you want to significantly increase taxes, they have not been able to get that contribution back up. So the town board has been paying what they could each year, but it has not been the amount needed. So our lowest funded ratio we got down to was in 2023, we were 39% funded. We started getting warnings on the PenFlex report saying that if we keep up this path, it will eventually end in insolvency, which was a discussion held a few years ago, which is not the option that we want to go with. So we have funding history here. You can see we got down to 38%, but we've started to turn it around. The town board has been throwing extra sales tax that we've had towards it to try and fix this problem. So you can see the last couple years we've had sponsored contributions over $450,000. That was not what was budgeted. That was what was amended to be put towards it once sales tax came in higher than it was expected to be. We've also had a good rate of return on our investments the last 2 years, 9.8% and 7.2%, after a year of a negative 16% though. So that didn't help in 2022. So here is more information. Our program assets are the amount of money that's actually sitting in the account being invested. Our accrued liability is the amount owed out if all the service members collected right now. So if everyone collected right now, we'd have to pay out $5.7 million. So the difference between the amount that's in the bank account, 2.6, and 5.7, would be the unfunded liability. We owe $3 million. If we paid out right now, we'd have $2.6 million available, and we'd have to come up with $3 million. So that's kind of a problem. Not that anyone would ever, hopefully, need to collect all at once, because that would seem like a doomsday situation. But if that were to happen, we would not be able to. So here is an amortization of that $3 million. So if we take it and spread it out over 20 years, we are looking at having to pay $238,000 every single year for the next 20 years, just to pay off the amount that's already been created as a liability. So that's already something we know we have to pay. And then you take the annual cost on top of that. So for the next 20 years, just to pay off what was already accrued, we have to pay $238,000. And then you have your annual cost, which is based on the amount of people reaching entitlement age, as well as the amount of people who are already entitled. And we add another $133,000 onto it for current year. So you have $238,000 historical, $133 current. That's how you get the $400,000 contribution that the Firefly or PenFlex was telling us we owed. So if we were paying in historical years $150,000, we might have covered the current year costs, but we didn't pay anything on the historical. So that's how it fell further and further behind. So here our planned contribution for upcoming years. You can see that in 25 to 2029, it's going to be around $400,000 every year based on the projections. You can see on this breakout going back 10 years, and all the yellows are the places where we were significantly in deficit of our contributions. They said we should be paying around $400,000. We were paying $150,000 to $200,000. We did here in 2023 and 2024, as well as 2022, make that extra payment. I separated it out here to show that this is what was budgeted, and then we took extra money from sales tax to throw at it. So, here's just highlighting the funded ratio. As I was mentioning, the 39% is the lowest we got in 2023. And we are trying to get it back up. We are currently at 46% funded. So that means if we were to pay out right now, we would have to pay out 46 cents on the dollar to everyone or find that extra $3 million to pay out. We met in 2022 with Landmark Wealth and PenFlex. They gave us some options of what we could do to fix this funding deficit. We could freeze the program and amortize the debt out and just pay that off. That's kind of part of what we were doing. I mentioned we are amortizing the debt, but we are not freezing the plan. We could terminate and pay it out. Like I said, we'd owe 46 cents on each dollar. We don't want to do that because they earn the credit, they should get it. We could change the plan to a defined contribution plan. The ambulance squad has that where you pay a certain amount each year and the investment does what it does. But we haven't explored that option. We are going to try and get the funded ratio back up. So we're doing a mix of amortizing the old debt and trying to get the funding up through current sales tax as well as property taxes to get up to the $400,000 a year.
You had mentioned that the 1 year, it was a 16% drop, where the last 2 years have been 7-something or 9-something.
Yes.
And the way it's going this year, I would expect, the way everything's going, it should be somewhere in that vicinity.
Right, and the actuarial calculates usually, I didn't put it in here, but they usually calculate on a 5% increase expected each year. So if it's 8%, you get an extra 3% buffer, whereas if it's less than that, then you may lose on the fund. So the other thing to consider when we talk about fire contracts, which are up next year, we have to renegotiate them next year. The cost of each firefighter is at least $10,000, probably more now, to outfit a full firefighter. That's not counting their vehicles or their hauls, that's just for their equipment.
It's closer to 13.
Thank you for that. So for the ambulance fund, that's 3% of the town's budget, and the emergency squad services roughly 600 to 700 calls a year, which is a ton, roughly 2 a day. So we have the contractual payment to the emergency squad. We are looking to increase that to $100,000 this year, which would be $20,000 more than we gave them the last 2 years. We did not have a contract update in 2025, so that 2024 budget did roll into 2025 for that. Our dispatch services is a 2% increase, like I mentioned, for the fire, as well as we pay for as well their health works like fire, and then we have building utilities, fuel for ambulance as workers' comp and their LoSAP. But their LoSAP, unlike the fire fund, is the defined contribution. So we are told the amount to put in, and then the investments do as they will. They earn $20 a year, and if that grows to $30, great. If it grows to $50, even better. But we're not told we have to make $400 at payout. We're told we put in $20. For the ambulance, we signed a contract with Gorman Ambulance in 2024 for the purchase of the new ambulance to replace a 2008 ambulance. That cost $273,000. The first half was paid in 2024. The other half is due at delivery, which we are hoping for in 2026. We were given originally an 18-month window, so hoping that that's coming to an end soon. The other ambulance we just paid off. It was from 2016. We paid that off in 2024, so no payment this year for the first year. EMS operating revenue. So when you talk about EMS, either the patient requiring the transport pays or the taxpayer pays. It's a common misconception that ambulance service is free and essential. It is not deemed an essential service, and so the cost is not completely covered by local taxes like a firefighter or a police outfit is. The EMS agencies rely on 4 different funding categories. They rely on local taxes or property taxes, patient fees and insurance payments, so billing revenue, grants and donations. When transferred to a hospital, an EMS agency can bill the patient for the service. They cannot charge the patient more than is set by the local municipality, and they also don't get funding as much from someone who denies service. So they may show up to a call, but if they don't transfer it, they don't get paid. And then EMS equipment needs, here's some historical costs that our EMS squad asked for, and you can see the ambulance, the town paid for both the last 2 ambulances. Heart monitors and defibrillators, they came from grants, as well as the CPR machine. One was paid for by donations from residents, one was paid from by the legislator Mills donation. So there's your 4 categories. You have the town property taxes, your grants, and your donations. And then here we're talking about technology, and the ambulances are getting better, which is great. Lucas devices are fabulous. They can help with CPR. They are great at helping keep you alive, especially if you have to do CPR for a long time or don't have a lot of responders to a call. It's very strenuous and you will peter out very quickly. So that is a great device to help, as well as powered stretchers that can go up into the thing. You don't have to lift. It's less strain on the volunteer who is working on them. It is helpful, but you have that technology. It comes at the cost. You have software, you have internet, you have data plans, you have maintenance, you have repairs and replacements, and all of those come at cost. So the ambulance district often comes to us asking for money towards equipment. That's also why they are looking into, well, they started billing because they needed more revenue. So ambulance billing, the town set the fees as of January 1st, 2024, when they were authorized to start billing. They base it on Medicare rates and Medicaid rates, and then there's also BLS, or basic life support, and ALS, advanced life support rates, as well as a treat release rate and a paramedic and mileage rate. So snippets from the billing policy is that the main function of the billing policy is to have the billing service, which is PAB, bill the insurance company of the patient who is transferred to the hospital. It is the anticipated that most revenues will be recovered from the insurance company. Residents of the town of Boston, in consideration of the fact that they pay district taxes, will have their co-insurance and co-pays offset, meaning that the town payment to the emergency squad will cover in place of a resident receiving a bill. However, anyone who is a non-resident will be pursued for the payment. So if the Boston Emergency Squad goes on a mutual aid call to Colden, that patient will have to pay. Or if someone comes to town hall and has to be transferred from town hall and doesn't live in the town, they will have to pay. History of payments from the town towards the emergency services. Here is both the emergency squad and the fire companies. It's been scrutinized this year that a lot of comparison between the fire rate and the tax of the emergency squad rate. Yes, the fire rate is a lot higher, but it's supporting 3 fire companies, as well as the emergency squad gets a lot of payments that aren't made directly to them. They have use of a town-owned building, they have payment of their gas, and they have payment of their utilities, all paid by the town. So they do have funding from the town that's not necessarily evident to them as much. So back in 2016 comparison, EMS squad was getting $36,000 or $37,000. You can see their funding was really low. In 2026, we're proposing $100,000. Their revenue in 10 years has tripled from the town. So while the tax rate has appeared to remain pretty stagnant, the town is contributing more to the EMS squad as a direct payment. And that has come from different things being able to be moved around, such as sales tax being allocated to them. That doesn't affect the property tax rate, but it is more revenue into the fund itself to be able to be paid to the company. And you can see the fire company has also had a steady increase. They, in 2016, were receiving $164,000 apiece, so you multiply that by 3 for the whole fund. and then in 2026, it was $237,000. So each of them are receiving $63,000 and $72,000 more than 10 years ago. And here is just a look at the percentage increases. So you can see that fire has had more steady increases year over year, and emergency squad has had larger increases more sporadically and more spread out. So there was no increases for emergency squad for almost 10 years, so we did a really big increase in 2023. For the lighting fund, this is less than 1% of your tax. It's only if you're in a lighting district. It covers the street lights. We did do an LED conversion back in 2019. That helped for a couple years with costs, but it's not helping with costs anymore. It has brought the usage down to a consistent level. So we used to have very spiky usage, even though it's just the street lights outside. Now it's very steady usage. It fluctuates only by the amount of hours that it's on through the year. So October through January, higher usage because more nighttime hours. Lighting district costs. At the LED conversion, you can see we had a significant decrease right away, and it was steady and low. Now we are facing supply contract increases, which have brought our costs back up to almost where they were before the LED conversion. Blowing up a smaller section of here, right down in the energy supply contract part, we blow that up closer, you can see that here the usage is cyclical for the year, and you can see that at each energy contract point where we went out in June and said this is what our rate's going to be for the next year, we've had fluctuations in what the costs will be. Our costs in July of 2025 are comparing to what they were in 2028 and 2018 and 19 prior to the conversion. So a lot of that's due to our supply rates going up. Here is in dollar value what our utility rates are for electricity and gas. So they doubled in that year, as well as slight changes since then. And that goes along with what is happening statewide in both electricity as well as gas. Here is some information from NYSEG. So I just discussed the supply part, which this is what makes up your total utility bill for NYSEG. You have your supply part is about 36%. Your NYSEG supplied part is 33%, which NYSEG is looking to do increases here. So they have a proposed 23.6% increase for their upcoming rate. That is the rate that they sent in front of New York State. New York State does come back and decide if they get that rate or not. They, the Public Utility Council comes back and says if they can have the full 23%, or they might be only allowed to get 15, or whatever it is. They are under the crunch though, because New York State is pushing all of their environmental goals, and they have an aging infrastructure. So with the aging infrastructure, they're trying to do all these projects to increase their load for all of the mandates that New York State is pushing out of requiring people to move from gas to electricity. So the utility company is under the crunch, just like the taxpayer is under the crunch. On natural gas, I don't have any information on the rates that are coming out, but here is something interesting I noticed with our own buildings. Each of our buildings here, you can see that our supply rates have gone up, which have made our total costs go up. And our total costs are now higher than they've been for the last 4 years. They're compared to 2018, 2019 costs on the national or natural gas side. Going into garbage, that's 28% of our town tax. It's garbage service through Waste Management. The contract was bid out in 2019. They were the only bid response. They did have a renewal clause, which was exercised in 2022. Originally, it was weekly trash, recycling in bulk, which changed when the renewal was exercised. That's when they implemented the totes that everyone either loves or hates. It also put in recycling costs to the town, and at first we had the blended value, which gave us money back. We were getting rebates for a few years. Now we have almost $30,000 of recycling a year. 2025 August actually set, unfortunately, the record high of a bill of $5,259 of recycling alone for that month. So here is the breakdown that Waste Management gives us of what our recycling is. So you can see that solid waste tonnage since our 2022 conversion to totes, our solid waste has actually decreased and our recycling volume has gone up significantly. So people are using the totes to recycle. I don't know what's going on with garbage though. So here we do have the At Your Door service. If you haven't used it, try it. Here's an informational video, which I will not be playing. But the link works if you have not tried At Your Door service. It can be used to do all of these eligible materials: household cleaners, paint products, fluorescent bulbs, thermostats, batteries, automotive, garden, flammable things. We have had great feedback on it. We've had way better feedback than the bulk. People have a lot of problems scheduling bulk, but they don't usually have problems with electronics and household waste service. You can go online and you schedule. If you go on, you'll be asked if you have only electronics, fluorescents, and batteries, or if you have a variety of things. Here's a list of not accepted items. It's on the website as well. And you answer a few questions, they'll send you a kit, and then you put it outside your door and they pick it up. So again, with the contract renewal, we got the totes. We also have the stickers sold at the town clerk's office for $3 a piece for additional bags. The recyclings and totes, we have bulk pickup once a month. Additional totes can be purchased from the town clerk's office. And then we had what was originally a 5% increase per year is now tied to CPI. So here is kind of a view of the additional totes and the stickers. We originally had a lot of people add totes. Now it's definitely more piecemeal. It's very spread out. The bag stickers have been consistent though. We've sold over 1,500 stickers since this was implemented. 400 plus sold just in 2025 alone. On the contract renewal, our renewal is of July to June. So these costs up here shown are on the July to June costs. They don't add out to the tax bill because we have to consider 6 months of the old rate and 6 months of the new rate when we set the rate for the town. So going to this page, the tax rate calculation I've calculated with garbage costs is going to be 6 months at $71,000 for the first 6 months, and then 6 months at $74,000. Breaking it down here to household, that would be 6 months at $22 per household and 6 months at $23 per household. So that's $279 for your garbage service. For the At Your Door service, here is the whole town cost is $100,000. Your personal individual house cost is $32 for the year. Recycling, I said we're paying about $30,000 for recycling a year. For each household, that's about $9. So that is the calculation of how we get the $320 that's in this year's budget. This is just a snippet from our contract showing that as of July 1st, 2025, as well as 26 and 2027, our increase is tied to CPI for inflation. That could be good. Right now, it's not. 6% increase this year, hoping for less next year, but we'll see. Water districts, 16% of the town tax covers the current district costs through ECWA, hydrant breaks, miscellaneous repairs, the water service to the hydrants, and debt payments on construction repairs. Recent repairs that we've done was the tank repairs to each of the stations, pump station generator, and water line replacements. For the prior debt, Water District 3 is really, and District 3 Extension are really the only ones with water debt outstanding from years past. That debt is from when their lines was put in, because most water debts are spanned out 30 to 40 years. So they will be paying on that until 2024 or 2040 and 2048. So another 23 years on the longest old debt right now. The water lines that we have in the ground, we have are broken out by district here, but we have about 320,000 linear foot, or 60 miles of water line in the ground. And here's a map, a basic map of our water lines. So to recap the budget portion of this, our priorities in setting our budget were really financing the water projects to bring safe drinking water, funding the fire low SAP, maintaining low taxes where we can by balancing out sales tax, so, versus other forms of revenue versus, instead of increasing taxes, as well as we want to retain our long-term staff. And remind you that each fund does get considered individually. That does not, a 1% increase on a fire fund does not increase a 1% increase on the overall budget, because it's a percentage of the overall budget. And everything gets individually analyzed, and then everything gets analyzed on the whole. So moving into the ongoing projects and more of the state of the town portion, we did do water tank repairs that are done. In just a quick before and after of Water District 1, Water District 2, and Water District 3. You can see we got rid of a lot of the rust. We had a really nice refurbishment, and that we started in 2021 when we went out to expecting about $1.8 million was what we put in our bond resolution. And then when our bid results came in, they came in at just over $1 million. And even better news for that is when we finished the project, our project came in under budget by $115,000. So that money then rolls into each of those funds to help pay for the debt service. The bond anticipation note or band that we issued in the first year, 2022, we went out for that whole just over $1 million. It sold at 3.87%, which was about $40,000 of interest due. We have to renew them every year. They're one-year terms. So we renewed it again in 2023. It sold at a higher interest rate, 4.2, which was slightly over $40,000 of interest. That also then meant we had our first principal payment, which was about $27,000. At this point, we then did a water line replacement for this section between Meadow Drive and Ripple on Boston State Road. We had CDBG funding and we had ARPA funding that covered it. Here are some of the resolutions, and the timeline was we started in 2021 with the award of the CDBG. And then we went through engineering, we went through awarding the bid, closing out the contract. We had a short-term agreement for comeback work. They came back, put the final asphalt top course on in 2023, and we closed out the project in 2024. So the total project cost of that small section of road was $491,000. We also did an RFP or an RFQ, request for quotes, request for proposals, kind of used concurrently for engineering services for the water projects. We had 4 companies put in their applications. Our 2 town engineers of Labella and CPL were picked to continue on as the water projects. We are primarily using CPL, but Labella is an offered option too. We have not done business with the Boys and King or GPI, that's why we have not picked them. We are a lease managed water district, which is a term you may not have ever heard, or you may have heard if you hang around town hall. It means that the infrastructure is publicly owned, it's town owned, but the water is supplied through the Water Authority, or ECWA. It's a contractual lease agreement, meaning the town owns the infrastructure, we have to maintain it, and we pay the Water Authority for any repairs needed. They are the ones, the Water Authority, who maintain the day-to-day business, they perform the regular maintenance, they provide the actual water supply. They do the customer service and the billing. And as they are more familiar with the day-to-day rate history and maintenance requirements, they provide us with a list once a year of the recommended repairs that need to be done to the infrastructure. This is the 2020 and 2021 list, and that is what kind of kicked off our development of the water projects. So that was used to create the first map planning report in August 2020. So blowing up that list, it changed slightly for 2022, but not by much. Most of the priorities are still the same. In that report, there's also pictures showing the leak history, which can be tied out to each of the priorities. So you can see priority number 1, Heinrich Road, had 20 leaks at the point where this report was issued. So that was helpful in using to determine where our water line priorities are going to be. In 2024 and 2025, they did add a secondary source recommendation for the water supply. They also expanded a longer distance on the Boston State Road, and they made more of them high priority items. So when we developed the start of these water projects, we looked at location as well as break history. So here is an overall cost estimate from 2020 was $10.6 million for the water projects. We then broke it down to $10 million of that was going to be for water lines, $400,000 was for the pump station repairs. This was more information from their report. This $10.6 million was going to have an estimated debt service to the user of $289. So way back in 2020, we were discussing bringing up the water service of this area to $289. Right now, as we discussed earlier on, it's at $88 after our doubling of the rate. So originally it was at $44. So as of 5 years ago, this rate increase was coming. It was building. We were slowly adding that way, but you were never going to get there with 10% increases at a time. So this year is just the year that that bubble's over. And hopefully until phase 2 comes along, we won't have to do another large increase. The 2026 budget doubles the capital rate, which will raise it to $88 in the capital plus the maintenance costs. So potential funding sources, we did have the CDBG grant. We used $300,000 of ARPA funds. We send in our RIA application every year, and the rest has to be financed by either by bonding it out. So here's just the history of our RIA applications. Every single year we submit, and every single year we are denied. So keeping up hope, 5th year, maybe the term, maybe not, we'll see. We did have a boil water advisory in 2021, which helped push us forward. That's when we really took a hard look at getting phase 1 off the ground. So we sectioned out all of the items from the high priority list, and this section in green is what we are looking at for phase 1. The rest of the projects were set for phase 2 and phase 3, which will work towards the rest of the center and south ends of town. So phase 1 in green here, it's Valley Circle, Heinrich, Zimmerman, Herman Hill, and South Abbott. And they are priorities 1, 2, 4, 7, and 9 on the early list. So those were all targeted because they're in the north end of town and they were high priority. So in 2021, that cost estimate was $3.8 million. A year later in 2022, that cost estimate went to $5.1 million. And then when we went out to bid in August of 2024, this is breaking out the different phases. At that point, we were looking at, we did the CDBG project. We had phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. The total project cost was $10 million. So we did in 2023 get a new cost estimate, and then we had to do amended bond resolutions. That increased from $10.6 million to $15.6 million. So the engineers estimated a cost increase of $5 million. So we went and did new bond resolutions, meaning new authorizations to borrow up to that amount. Phase 1 went out to bid, and we finally got health department approvals, did that. We had 8 bids received, and lucky for the town, all of the costs came in under what was the cost estimate. In fact, a low bid even came in under what the original cost estimate from 5 years earlier was. So it did come in at $2.415, 741, so $2.4 million for phase 1. Again, the original cost estimate was 2.7. So these are just the bid tabs and then the awarding of the bid. We also have to factor in the engineering costs, which were $355,000, which is where we come up with the $2.7 million here. Construction engineering for the $2.7 million for the bond. We then added it to the amount for the water tank, and we issued a new money and a renewal issuance in 2024 of 3.758. That sold at 3.69% interest, which is what gave us an interest amount of $138,000 due last year. And, so we put a 15% increase for last year for the interest. Now that we sold it again, and we are going to have a principal payment on top of this, we have $129,000 of interest due. We also have $35,000 of principal due on the water tanks and $90,000 of principal due on the water lines. So that is where the capital code comes from. So here are some water line replacements in pictures, because we are 90% complete with water phase 1. So here's construction pictures from removing pipes and placing new pipes. The blue is all new. The kind of brownish stuff is the ductile iron that's in the ground already, which was being replaced. It's crumbling in some spots, being replaced by the PVC pipes. Here is the segment of them going under Boston, the crossing at Boston State Road 391. So you can see that they're working all through the night to keep people out, keep it away from the heavy traffic. Here is connecting each of the pictures from them connecting to each of the houses. You can see each of these water supply lines that run up to the houses. Then reconstruction, we did move the water line into the road on Heinrich Road, so that had to be repaved. Other places it was reconstruction of the edge as well as all new hydrants along there. They could not reuse any of the hydrants, including the hydrants we just replaced within the year. So phase 1, the status update is we are 90% done. We had 2 change orders approved so far. The first was regarding moving the Heinrich section of the road into the road. That was a feasibility because a lot of trees were in the way as well as other roadblocks from people's property lines. The second related to changes in the planned creek and road crossings. Here are descriptions for more specifics of what was added and what was removed. They had to do different types of fill for moving the water line, as well as when they are going to do an open cut of the creek that costs more than directional and drilling.
They haven't done the open of the creek yet, have they?
No,
That's what,
we're waiting on the permits from Erie County Health. So yeah, we did submit a partial completion in August of 2025, so 9,650 of the 10,770 linear feet have been submitted for completion. Part of that 10% that's not complete is the creek crossing. That is one of the things that we have. The drilling didn't work. We're waiting for an emergency permit to open cut because they couldn't get through the shale that in the amount of space that they had. So going and discussing phase 2 of waters, again, we took care of the north end of town, so now we have to do the south and center section. All these red pieces are the pieces that still need to be done. The engineering costs relating to this proposal, we actually just got in yesterday. That is going to be almost $1 million in itself just for engineering, which seems crazy to me. Interestingly enough though, I mean, we had $300,000 of engineering on phase 1, and this is about 3 times the project, so 3 times the engineering as well. Again, also that part of the factor is the construction administration, so they're being on site and observing it is part of the cost, and the longer the lines, the more time has to be spent.
Yeah, if I can just chime in too, while that, right, this will be something in front of the town board next week at the board meeting, but for that price tag, that's going to, the engineering estimate is about 36 to 38 weeks of construction to put it, so there's a lot more going on to that, but yeah, this is the going rate for engineering services, so when you break it all down. 36 to 38 weeks, essentially an entire year of construction, not just a midsummer project. Yeah, got a lot ahead of us.
You'll see Stafford go the whole night.
Yeah, it's kind of disjointed too, so it's not just going to be one section.
Yeah, I mean, to put it in, it's all public information. You'll see in the board packet next week. To give you an idea, the linear footage equates to just shy of 5. If you were to run the water mains concurrently, it's just shy of 5 miles of water lines that we're putting in. So big project.
Yes, so that, from the Phase 2 water reports, we did get an updated engineering report in May. So we had $1 million in engineering and 10 times that in actual cost. The estimation of the total cost of the construction is $9 million. So overall project is going to be around 10 million, obviously determined based on what comes in with the bid. New in the project, they did put the secondary source of water in that was not in the original letters that we based the project off of. So we are going to be needing to talk about going out to do more amended bond resolutions to add that in. Because you can only borrow for what you're authorized for and only can spend the bond money on the authorized purposes, which that was not an authorized purpose. So the addition of secondary source, basically, if we have a break around Liebler Road or south of it, you lose water to everything south of it because the main artery for that section comes straight down Boston State Road. So anything south of Town Hall, if you have a break, you lose water. So the secondary source would provide another flow of water into the main line beyond just the main artery. The three options that we were given by Erie County Water were to come down from the District 3 tank and come down either Boston Cross or Boston Colden, or come in from Eden side across Polish Hill from the District 2 side. That one seems to be more feasible, and that's the one that the town is planning to go with for right now. This also, Erie County Water recommended improvements. There's two options for the district Phase 2. You can do a district overlay, which I'll explain more about in a minute, which would put the cost on the whole town. And that would also allow the infrastructure improvements, the purposes of creating the water. It would also help distribute the cost over the whole town. You would have the same effect of doing the improvements. Also, if we don't do the overlay, it'll just be the cost will fall on each of the districts. So most of these are in Water District 1 or District 2. The big question comes in with the secondary source is not in a water district right now. We did have discussions with our engineer CPL. It would probably be a transmission line that just transports the water through. And then if we are going to add service connections, we'd have to create a new district for that, if we don't go with the district overlay. So here is just a breakdown of what potentially the cost could be if we did the district overlay or the non-district overlay and what each of the different districts' costs could be. So what does the district overlay mean? We did a water consolidation study back in 2021 into 2023. CPL held the public meeting to explain that the existing water districts and how they each have different debts based on different their different infrastructure and how old they've been and what their improvements have been, and consolidation options. So there's 2,815 water users in the town out of 3,739 at the time of this study. Right here is the town line, and you can see all these spots in white. They don't have water service and they're not in a district. There's also the lighter colors of each of them are where they're in a district, but they don't have water as well. The bright colors are where they are serviced with water. So existing debt at the time of this was roughly 4.6 million, and then they had anticipated water district or District 1 paying for Phase 1, which again, that was anticipated at 5 million, it came in at 2.7, and then Phase 2 and 3. So the total debt for this study they were anticipating was $20 million. That number carries through. And then they looked at potential build out because it's always a question. That does not mean this is talking about we're building out now, it's just a study for if we built out. At the time the study was done, they looked at three areas. The Water District 2 extension, which is a big portion of people in a district not paying for money. They looked at this section here, which they called South Central, which would be adding new people into a new district, and then Southeast Water over here, adding new people into a new district. So at each of those paying for just the service they're getting, you have $11 million being spread across 130 users, $12 million being spread across 145 new users, and $6 million being spread across 77 new users. If you want to do the math and calculate that out, that's a hefty sum on each household. So where the water district overlay comes in, you could look at spreading it across all the districts. So here is just breaking down each of those different 3 maps that I was showing you. Each of the stars break out into its own map, and it has its own cost estimate. And then you could do a district overlay where the whole town becomes a district. You could do unit-based calculation, or you could do ad valorem. So you could have everyone pay $100, or you could have everyone pay 10%. That's unit-based versus ad valorem. You could do a consolidation of the entire town, or just people already in districts. And you could also do this for existing debt or potential projects. So here they break down the amount of the cost if you do an overlay, and also amount with the build out. They have the ad valorem options as well as rate options. So the steps for that would be, if they want to spread the cost across any of these build out projects, the town board would have to make a decision to go this route. Make a district overlay across the whole town, basically a new district with everyone in the town in it. They would have to pick the methodology. Are you going to do unit-based, where it's a dollar value, or percentage-based? Are you going to pick just the people in water districts or the whole town? Then you'd have to do the environmental study, have a public hearing, and you'd have to have board action, and then you'd have to have a new code on the tax roll.
When you did the whole town overlay.
Yes.
You did a whole new district, by using the whole town, does that mean everybody in the town is going to get it? Or is it just like it is now that some of the areas are paying for water and not getting water?
That is exactly right. You'd have some people still not getting water, because just because you do the district doesn't mean they get water. But it would have the potentiality of, if they wanted to do this, you now, instead of having 130 users paying $11 million, you'd be spreading that $11 million over 3,000 people.
Yeah, if I can chime in too. So I just did the math real quick, kind of anticipated this one. So New York State Comptroller jumps in on this topic, and the reason being is that, to give you an idea, on those 3 different areas, that first district, if you were to take the proposed engineer and estimated cost, divide that over the users over roughly even a 40-year. I took it way above a 30. But even on a 40-year, to give you an idea, the ratepayer per year is paying $2,115. District 2 is paying $2,165 per year. The Area 3 is $2,142. The town board would need to seek permission to levy that type of tax, because it could be viewed and most definitely deemed as an undue burden on the ratepayer, which is why cost-benefit analysis, it's not, at least in today's numbers, it's not in the deck of cards.
But how do you tell people to pay for something, just like we have for years, people paying for sewers that aren't getting sewers? People paying, like people on Rockwood and Sherrill, would still be continuing to pay for something in a district that they're not getting.
That's why you have 2 options. You can do just the district, the people already in districts, or you could do it the whole town.
And that's what we've done in the past,
Right.
correct? Every time we did a district, a new district, created a new district, the people in that district
Yep.
paid for what was being done. That was the whole idea of it. They went out and got petitions, and those people would sign a petition stating that that's what they wanted.
Right, so that green area.
So yeah, like the green area is District 2, where there's no water,
Right,
which is the most contentious one.
yes.
So yes, the reason you would potentially do a district overlay is for this effect of, you have the whole district in there. So now if you want to add water to that section, the people in the whole town is paying the $11 million instead of just the 100-something people there. So here it shows kind of what Jason was saying. So if you consolidate the existing debts, your rates here and at the end there, so if you consolidate across the entire town, the build out, you can, your cost is a lot different, or a lot less if you put it across the whole town versus if you have it just on the people paying for it. So the goal, if you do an overlay, would be to bring water to the people who aren't serviced.
Right, and I know that, since, of course, we're on video, I'll toss out there too, for those at home that may be watching. How can the town board legally create a townwide district overlay like that? And the reason being is that whole red shaded area, that's District 1. Remove that from the puzzle, nobody gets water in town, that's our artery. So that's how we can legally, should the town board so choose, create a district overlay for everyone that currently has water, or potentially the light green shaded area to build out water there. We can do that district overlay, the way I've explained it to people. It's not the exact science in government, but if you go to the grocery store and you look at the price that you're purchasing, let's say the peanut butter, but if you look at the unit price, and you can buy it like a bulk packet of it, you're focused on that unit price. You bring in more, it's like going to BJ's, you're buying in bulk, you're taking, to Ellie's point, you're taking the totality of the parcels and driving that per unit price down versus kind of a face value.
You mentioned,
price.
Ellie, of the town board seeking it coming down from Eden underneath that way. Well, could there be a possibility of coming from both sides of the hill?
Anything's possible for a
No,
cost.
well, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
for cost effective, you take that side
So
of the hill.
these are all
you bring
recommended by the
people
Water
in from
Authority.
Eden, okay, which would come down and take care of that side of the hill. And then that side of the hill, which would be the Colvin side,
Which would add extra, or that would be a good cause, because that'd be coming down right here in this unserviced section. It would be a good build-out perspective of that area as well.
right, and that's what I was going at.
Right, so the big picture on the system, a lot of these recommendations, again, come from Erie County Water Authority, because we're lease managed, they have a relatively large say in what is and is not allowed, because they have to make sure that they can keep up with pressure, et cetera, to keep the system running. So the Water Authority really does.
Yeah, one
have
of the
quite a bit of sway in these
considerations
decisions.
with this was, it's a section here that's coming over. They did have to assess if the pumps that are currently there have enough capacity to even take on the
Yeah,
extra
I
load.
think that was one of the things that when we did that side of the hill over there, to make sure with the capacity of the people that didn't have water, if we continued water on, that pump station and that tank station was big enough to take care of the rest of that hill.
Mhm. Yep, current sitting infrastructure, we are okay. We start to bill out, we're, any of the white areas that are
Yes.
on that map, we're having a completely different conversation because of potentially not having enough pressure.
So, yeah, that's where the district overlay is good if you're looking to continue doing large projects to build it out.
And if I understand this correctly, the people that are in the white area, there is no fee on their tax bill.
Right, they're on a well.
Right, and so the light green, there's a small fee that
Yes.
is attached.
Right.
Yeah, like some of them have like $8 or something.
If you do the secondary water source, are they looking at homes passed while they do that? Are they gonna add more users as they go down the road, add to the secondary water source? Or
There's-
is it just to tap into the existing system?
We had this conversation because I had that exact same question. There is 15 parcels mentioned that it would pass. If we, because it's not currently in a district, if we are going to let them tap in, we would need to create a district. Either we'd have to do a district overlay of the portions serviced by that, or create a new district for those parcels and have them pay a proportion of the cost of adding this because they'd be now serviced by it as well. They wouldn't just continue to skate by with no cost.
So we're going to dig up their yard, put in pipes and stuff, but not give them the option to actually have water.
Potentially.
Well, potentially, but keep in mind, so
There's
that's
two,
gonna
yes,
go in front of their
there's
house.
two ways that would go. Either it becomes a transmission line where it comes in front of their house, dig it up and they don't get water, or we let them tap in and create a new district and,
But keep in mind, to create, Aldi's 100% accurate on this, is that keep in mind, those 13 parcels that are on that potential transmission line, once the town/engineer reaches out to them, if 2 people want it and everybody else does not, chances are the town board is not going to allow those 2 people to tap in, because there will be enough negative to say, no, we don't want to establish a district. However, we still legally can place a transmission line in front there down the road if, somebody's, the transmission line obviously could change into a service line in the event that enough parcels are interested in tapping into it. But if there's not, we can easily move forward with the transmission line, justifying it under public safety and health, because we need to make sure that, God forbid, something does happen. And last winter was a perfect example of this. If you recall, we smack in the middle of a blizzard, had a water main break down by May Drive, flooded Boston State Road. What happened? South end of town was without water for, I think it was on the back road, 8 hours. So that is why we're trying to build that continuity, so the south end of town doesn't continue to have issues. Because even if we fix what's in the ground today, we still need another feeder line to be able to bridge that continuity. So, sorry.
No, good pickup, because that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yep, it is.
And then,
Great
yeah,
questions.
so either, if we do create the district, it would be the same path as creating a consolidation district, just on a smaller scale. You'd have to get the input of the residents, and then you'd still have to follow the seeker, the public hearing, and the permissive referendum, just to create the district, whether it's 15 parcels or a larger section. So then we also were notified that our water generators, our generators at the water tanks for District 2 and District 3 need to be replaced. We had an estimate of $108,000 total, so half of that for each. And we got the update this week that they were replaced last week. We are awaiting the final bill. Hopefully the dollar value is in line with the estimate, because we haven't been told that. But they are supposedly in service now, which is good. They should run for many more years. So summary of all the water stuff we talked about the water tanks, the Boston State Road being done by CDBG. We are in phase 1, we talked about phase 2, and we talked about potential build out options. Recent repairs that we've done for water, you can see by each district I broke out. We've done things like pressure valves, broken hydrants, and then very low frequency drives, as well as the water tanks. Talking about something other than water, we did our comprehensive plan. It was adopted in April of this year. So this is a view from our 2001 version, and then 24 years later, here's some screenshots from both the draft and the final version, because I like some of the graphics of the draft better than the final. But anyways, we did get a resolution approving CPL for $94,000 to do this. We went ahead with this project because we got 2 grants. We had a $25,000 from Erie County, as well as a $63,000 from New York State Department of State. So the town costs are just a couple $1,000s, which is up here. This is just the plan and intent and purpose. So what is a comprehensive plan? It takes a look at the plan for the town for the future. Where do you want it, and where do you want growth? How do you want growth? What are your goals for the town? So we did have to follow some of the smart growth principles from New York State. Those are outlined here, as well as Erie County had their farmland protection and agricultural plan. So we did outreach originally. We did public meetings, which were held throughout 2023 and 2024. Studies were done. Surveys were sent out to business owners, agricultural communities, high school families, high school students, young families. We originally, this was from the draft, we had 233 respondents. By the final version, we had 500 survey responses with over 3,000 visits to the project website. So comprehensive, you first look at where your current town profile is. So this breaks out agricultural, commercial, public, vacant land, all those different categories. As well as you look at the demographics of the community. You have the de-nesters, growing, school-age children, the median household income, and you take a look at creating the vision of what you want to see in the town. So the vision statement was that it's a blend of small town charm with modern infrastructure. So from there, you create your core values, the small town dynamic, the open spaces, recreation and trails, family-oriented, community safe, and sustainable infrastructure, which was then built into the desires were compelled from the survey results, from the business owners, the families, the teens, as well as the agricultural community. And all of those were wrapped in and different goals were set. Goals to preserve the community feel and small town character, to promote a balanced mix of housing and businesses, improve and maintain local infrastructure, preserve and protect scenic, historical and natural resources, promote transportation, and allocate resources. What does that all mean? It helps you create the plan for where do you want your future land use to be. Do you want your farming to be down in the hamlet or up in the hills? But then you also have to consider the residential and the build out of any commercial spaces. So on top of just the general look at that, how do you want the town to look? One of the things that was proposed is renovations to town property, including expanding walking trails, paving walking trails, potential senior center, proposed landscape buffer to hide the highway barn, as well as things in the town for the roadways, adding bike paths to the side of the roads, adding walking trails, potentially looking at rails to trails coming to town, traffic circles. There were 3 in the proposed plan, one at the light where there's a lot of accidents and near mixes by the north end of town, one at where Abbott comes into Boston State Road by the Boston Garage, and one at the south end by Boston Cross. And then there's also a list of proposed future projects and kind of an estimated high-level cost of what some of these would be, such as the roundabouts, multi-use paths, historic landmarks, park improvements, etc. So where we are at the final stage of the plan. It was adopted for the town. We are still waiting on the final payout from Erie County. We just got the final payment reimbursement from New York State Smart Girls. So the plan is adopted, but we haven't quite closed the project out yet on the town side. We did put in an electric vehicle charging station that is completed in early '25, late '24. We got 2 different Clean Energy Community grants. We got one for $5,000 and one for $10,000. Those were used to fund the charging stations that sit out there for the electronic vehicles. Our charging station itself cost $9,900 and the installation was $6,000. Be great if more people use them now. Tennis court, we did do the refurbishment of the court itself. We added pickleball courts, which was a highly requested and also highly used piece of that change. The resurfacing was completed in 2024. We were also looking to do a fence, but we got original quotes over $30,000, which means we had to go out for a formal bid. When we went out for a formal bid, those all of a sudden were about $100,000. And that's a hard pill to swallow when we know we could have gotten it for $30,000. So the town board did reject the bids with the intention to rebid, which has not been done yet. But that's where that project sits. The generator that sits out front right here, that yellow box that looks like that, we were awarded the bid to Industrial Power Company in September 2023. We had all the work done through 2024 and it is sitting in place, and we are still waiting to close out based on a few final reports that we're waiting on. The engineering service for that was $20,000 and our construction cost for that was $222,000. So $240,000 for just the generator that sits there. But we shouldn't lose power anymore.
Worked well for the Easter egg hunt.
Did it go on that day?
It did. It did. This end of town lost power during the Easter egg hunt, and the good news is not a single person realized we even lost power. Kicked right on, and the event went on without a hitch.
Good. So yeah, we did have one change order with the generator, which did slow down the project a little bit. We did have to adjust where the feeder line for the gas came in from the road. So that was a additional $34,000, taking the total project cost to $276,000. The front entryway, also a slow-moving project. We needed a full replacement of the stairs, handrails, and pillars. We had a bid opening in December of 2023. 6 bids were received. We awarded the low bid to AA Services. They were told to get it done in 45 days. And we had the front step concrete poured 3 times. And then the column replacement, we waited until February 2025, a year after contract award. We said enough of this, and we approved the second bidder to finish the project. And by June of 2025, we had the project completed and paid out. That's not our final look, I just couldn't find a picture of our final look. Is finally done and finished though. We had a year and a half on a project that should have taken 45 days. Government. Next is our fuel tanks, another slow-moving project that shouldn't be slow-moving. Were contacted in November of last year about a leak in the diesel tank based on periodic testing done by Pump Doctor. We had a DEC consent order to remove. We gathered proposals to remove the tank, and that was done by March of 2025. They were out of the ground. Here's some pictures of the removal. We did find that there was diesel in the soil then, so we had to get samples sent in for soil testing. That happened, the testing through April, and the soil was actually removed by May. So our final closeout of the removal and the soil testing and all of that came in through July, which then leads us to, these are just the official documents of that and our costs. We did go with Labella for $46,000, which was cheaper than the Pump Doctor. We did have a change order or a supplemental work agreement because the soil that came back contaminated had to be tested, and the volume that had to be tested and removed was much larger quantity than originally expected. So that's where the supplemental work order came in. But even with that, that $75,000 to Labella was still cheaper than Pump Doctor's original cost. So after the removal, you start looking at getting new. So we agreed to pay Labella $64,000 for the engineering, which we then just recently went out for bid on, with the bid opening happening yesterday. Our bid costs came in at $244 for the low bid. Right now, I didn't put company names on those because they are being reviewed by the engineer to make sure everything is complete before we announce final cost and final bid. So that hopefully will be on next week's board meeting. And then just moving through those stages, we started the design in March, and right now in October we had the bid opening. In the meantime, we did start in January leasing a temporary diesel tank, and we started in April leasing a temporary gas tank at a monthly service cost. Then historical markers, the pride and joy of our historian. He's been working every year to get at least one replaced or new. So our most recent one for 2025, the most recent picture I have was the first settler. And then just showing the history of recent ones. I know there are more than these. This is the full list of most recent ones I had. 2021, we did the typhoid fever, we did the Patriot burials and first settler in 2024. 2025 are coming soon. We got them in. They have to be installed. I don't have pictures because they're either sitting in a box or sitting in the highway department waiting to be installed. But those are for the Anthony Homestead and First Fire Company in North Boston. 2026, we are looking at a replacement of 1 to 2 and maybe applying for a Pomeroy grant again. One of the things we discussed with the historian was maybe applying on the Davis Mansion. If you want me to take this out for online, I can. Let me know. But it was a discussion we had in the budget. It's basically like a living museum. When his wife passed away, he lived out of one room of the house and basically turned the rest of his house and kept it as a moment in time, basically. Interesting story. Frank has a lot of information on many cool stories of the town. Another project that has been brought up recently is holiday lights. Over the last 30 to 40 years, outlets and wirings that are the wreaths, the snowflakes, and the standalone standalone decorations tie into the electrical poles along the town, mainly Boston State Road strip. There are 69 poles, 46 are operational right now, 14 need repair, and 9 need new installations. The problem with that is if we touch the poles now, they have to be brought up to current code standards. We also need to go into a attachment agreement with NICEAG because they own the poles. So we did get proposals from CPL and Labella, both of them in the $13,000 range. Based on early estimates, the cost of doing these proposed repairs could be around $1,000 per pole, so we're estimating $70,000 for this project if it goes to completion. The steps to do that would be the engineer drafts formal bid specs, which is, I believe, the step we're at right now. Then bids would be advertised and the town can award the project. At any point, the town can just say, no, we're not doing this. Just like I mentioned we did with the tennis courts fence, just because we got to bid doesn't mean we are required to do it. Another thing people ask about is the playground. It is aging. People are complaining about rust and safety. We did have a quote submitted by Miracle Recreation for an inclusive playground this year. This is based on people asking continuously. We received the quote and it came in around $500,000. This is the layout of what they proposed to us. It is a Sourcewell contract, so we wouldn't need to go out for multiple bids. Here are the items that are included in this. One of each type of the inclusive swings, regular swing, toddler swing, multi-generational swing, accessible swing, bunch of different stand and play items, not a ton of slides, not a ton of rambunctious kid items. Honestly, my kids who are perfect playground kid age, I'm not sure they'd like this for almost $500,000.
Especially with one right down the road at Chestnut Ridge.
So
Right.
I
Have to go that way.
I mean, yeah, we've been to the Chestnut Ridge one, and while this rocker thing is awesome for people with accessibility needs, if your kids aren't accessibility needs kids, it's boring.
That's what I'm saying.
They do love the ones at Spraguebrook that rotate, that are bigger than this though, I will tell you that. The ones with the big canopy that spin, they love those. But, so these are the items in this $500,000 proposal. Honestly, having kids in that age group, I don't think I would push this project forward with this proposal, because looking at my kids, I don't think they'd like it. They do have other options. I don't know if we would just ask them to tailor until we get something we like, but keep in mind, these are the amount of features you get for $500,000. So you add more features, you're paying more cost.
I will just toss in there too, that our playground is currently not accessible because there's stone there. Actually, it's a big no-no, as you might imagine. So, well, a big part of the cost here is you can kind of see it, yeah, first, one slide back, I think it was your first one. Yeah, like top left-hand corner, you can see that it has that new play surface, and that's a new, obviously that's a new thing that's out there, but that's a big safety component for kids and when it comes to playgrounds, and you absolutely pay for that. Off the top of my head, I don't think you had the slide of it. I think that's around $100,000 just for the surface.
$200,000 for the play surface alone, I believe.
There it is, okay, yeah, he was, yeah. it was
That's what I was looking to see if it was broken out there.
Well, years ago at the old Boston Valley School, it was wood chips. And then when the wood chips went out, because the bees went into the wood chips, we took that out. Then we put the new playground in here and stuff, and that was back in the
Yeah, so this is,
era, and Kathy Dobson and stuff. We all put that in to try to save money, but at that time, all the specs and qualifications were completely different.
yeah,
It's
the
grass.
cord rubber mat or whatever, yeah, 100,000, 200,000, I mean, and then installation here, 200,000 for installation. The equipment itself isn't horrible, I mean, 225,000. Relatively, that's not horribly expensive. It's the installation, it's the rubber mat, it's all those things too. So, we are looking into it, it's just balancing, like, I don't wanna just put a project forward because it's something the community wants, if it's not something the community's gonna be happy and loving. Anyways, North Boston Ball Field, this is also a proposed place, but people want to get up and running. This has been discussed with our Parks Department for multiple years now. Here's a picture from Google Maps. You can kind of see a faint outline of where a ball field used to be. There's a ground view. It is kind of still there, but not really. One of the proposals that we got in would be to make it a multi-use baseball softball field or just go with softball. We would still need to follow the formal process of procurement for this, so we would need more quotes, but this wasn't original numbers. We could fund this out of building reserves or Parks and Recreation reserve if we want to go with this. This is not a actual project on the table right now. These are community concerns. Records management grant, we did actually get, this might be out of order, but we did actually get a grant for this, so this is actually happening as long as all the paperwork goes through. $74,965, so that's where I mentioned earlier about adding a position to help with managing that, because otherwise it falls on Sandy in the town clerk's office. Future projects also in consideration, I did do separate slides for some of these, like the playground. We were also looking at like the stage music system for the concerts, fixing the community room flooring. We're hoping to apply for CDBG. I don't know if we'll have estimates in time for this year. And a drainage study has been in discussion for years because we did the drainage study in 2021. Just going through here some grants we've been awarded in the last few years. I haven't really updated. We are still waiting on DASNY. You can see right here we have the comp plan that's finishing up, even though that was awarded a couple years ago, and then more recent grants. And then here we've just done successful projects in the last few years. We've done things financially, like awarding grant funding, doing more funding for the fire and ambulance companies. We've done capital planning, like cycling out the highway trucks every year, doing a drainage reserve fund, working on water lines. We've done ADA and town hall things such as the chairs in the courtroom, the elevator, the boiler, rerunning internet cabling. Next we need some electrical updates. Our town-owned structures, we did the South Boston Playground, the North Boston Park Shelter, generators for pretty much every building now, I think.
Yes.
Everybody, yeah.
Yep.
And then we've got the Boys and Girls Club, we have a Stay Fit dining program as well as exercise program, which is lovely to see on Wednesdays for the seniors. If you know a senior who needs exercise, Wednesdays. And then memorial bricks, historical markers, and other things. So thank you for coming. Any questions? Want to know?
You did a great job.
2 hours. I know it's a lot for you to do it, and it was a full 2 hours, so thank you for sticking with me. I kind of made this over the years from more of